Past participles, as adjectives in Spanish, is a form of a verb used to form a perfect or a passive tense as an adjective. In English, this concept is very simple because most verbs often end in ed, like talk, which becomes talked, clean, which becomes cleaned, and so on. However, there are irregular verbs in English, like buy, drive, speak, and so on. Obviously, you don't need to know all of them. In Spanish, nonetheless, you have the same concept, but with a bit more variety and just a few irregular verbs that are easy to memorize. For regular AR verbs, the form of the past participle is achieved by dropping the ending and putting the ending ado, like hablar, which becomes hablado. Speak to spoken. For regular ER and IR verbs, you drop the ending and add the ending ido, like comer, which is comido, and vivir, which is vivido, meaning eaten and lived. In case you want to use any other regular verb that ends in AR, ER, or IR, now you know how. There are, however, irregular verbs that require an accent on the E, primarily ER and IR verbs that end with two vowels, like caer, which becomes caído, with an emphasis on the I, caído, creer, which becomes creído, leer, which becomes leído, oír, which becomes oído, reír, which becomes reído, sonreír, which becomes sonreído, and traer, which becomes traído. Of course, there's other verbs in Spanish that follow this pattern, but you don't need to know all of them. At last, there are general irregular verbs used as past participles, and these include abrir, decir, describir, descubrir, escribir, hacer, morir, poner, resolver, romper, ver, and volver. In case you want to use these verbs as adjectives, now you know how. However, in Spanish, these verbs are often used with the verb estar because, in case you don't remember, estar is used to describe the condition of things temporarily. When we use past participles as adjectives, we're using adjectives to describe something for the moment. In Spanish, gender and plurality have to match in the sentence, and here are some examples. Saying something like I closed the door would be yo cerré la puerta, but another way to say the sentence is the door is closed. La puerta está cerrada. And as you can see, we're using the verb estar to describe the condition of the door, with cerrada being the adjective that matches the gender. Hence, puerta is the feminine word. Additionally, you don't have to use the verb estar when writing such a sentence. Instead, we can just say the closed door, which would be la puerta cerrada. And because we're using a past participle as an adjective, we have to put it after the noun because it's a rule in Spanish. And basically, the same idea applies to any sentence you want to say. And here are some examples. How would you say the phrase, the book is open? El libro está abierto. And now, how would you say this phrase without estar? El libro abierto, meaning the opened book, with abierto being an irregular adjective. How would you say the texts are written? Los textos están escritos. And now, how would you say this phrase without estar? Los textos escritos, the written text. How would you say the bed is made? La cama está hecha, or la cama hecha, meaning the made bed. How would you say the problem is resolved? El problema está resuelto, or el problema resuelto, the resolved problem. How would you say my answers are completed? Mis respuestas están completas, or mis respuestas completas, my completed answers. And here's a very interesting one. How would you say the day is dead? El día es muerto. Now, how would you say the dead day? El día muerto. Hopefully, you can see where I'm going with this. And if not, what I'm trying to say is the Day of the Dead, which is a famous Mexican holiday that people hear about. How would you say this phrase in Spanish? El Día de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. Muertos is a past participle used as an adjective that's plural, and now, hopefully you understand what this phrase means. And here, I want to show one personal concept that I used to think about when I was learning Spanish through English. In English, I used to think of phrases like, I finished and I am finished. Looking at these phrases, I used to think that the same concept work in Spanish because English has the same word for finished in the two sentences. Therefore, I thought that the way you say the phrases in Spanish is yo terminé and yo estoy terminé. And the reason why I thought this way is because the word finished doesn't change in English, so it must be the same in Spanish. However, because at the time I haven't learned past participles yet, this is where I realized that the phrases are yo terminé and yo estoy terminado, with terminado being the adjective. And here, my thinking process changed because I realized why English is a simple language, especially when it's compared to Spanish. In these cases, you have to watch out for these ideas when you learn languages because it teaches you how to think properly. So that's it. This has been past participles as adjectives in Spanish. Thank you for watching this video, and hopefully I made your learning just a bit simpler.